Welcome back to Our World with Black Enterprise. For Lonnie Bunch, being the founding director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture is the centerpiece of his career as a historian. He is a game changer in race relations, and Black Enterprise recognized him at the inaugural Black Men Excel Summit.
By recognizing me, what you do is you embrace the power and the importance of the past. So I accept this award on behalf of all those Black men who believed in an America that did not believe in them.
In many ways, we often look very critically at the Black male, that most of the news is negative, most of the concerns are what happened to the Black male. It's nice to be able to create a moment where you step back and look at the achievement, look at not just the challenges, but look at how people have overcome. And what's so powerful about this is that it gives us a way to understand the role the Black men have played, and really also give Black men a chance to just pat each other on the back and say, well done.
Bunch says history has played a powerful pull throughout his entire life.
When I was a kid, my grandfather used to read to me because I couldn't read like many of the other kids. And one day he was reading a book and it had pictures of children. And he said that the caption said these children would probably be dead by now because the picture was taken in the 1870s or something. And he said, isn't it a shame that people could live their lives, die, and all it says is anonymous? And I was fascinated by this notion that how can we make sure that we could give voice to the voiceless and make the anonymous visible? So I've always been curious about what went on before. I didn't know I'd become a historian, I didn't know I'd become a museum director, but I knew I was interested in making sure that people who were forgotten in the past will be remembered.
But this lifelong educator wants to make sure history is empowering today for everybody.
My goal is to use history as a way to help people understand each other, help people cross racial lines. So when I was growing up and I would hear my father sort of basically claim his Americanness, claim his right to be equal, and I was always struck that, okay, how do I help? How do I use history? How do I use museums to help people recognize that we've got to come together, that we've got to cross these barriers? And in some ways, growing up the way I did, I had feet in the world of the African American community, but I grew up in an Italian town, so I grew up speaking Sicilian, right? So I realized that all of my life it's been balancing conflicting worlds. And so I use my history, my work, to say, how can we make America better?
What a grand and glorious day to open a museum that will not just tell of a people's journey, but also of a nation's story.
The influence of the museum is unmistakable. More than 3 million people have visited since its opening in September 2016.
African American history is not somehow separate from our larger American story. It's not the underside of the American story. It is central to the American story.
Before I took this job, I never talked about ancestors. I talked about history, but never ancestors. As soon as I took this job, I suddenly realized this was really about honoring all of our ancestors. So for me, every time I would hit a struggle, I would say, but the ancestors didn't quit. And so that's really what allowed me to keep moving forward.
The museum's development also brought together people from across the country who donated more than $250 million.
You suddenly see Black business people who are in corporate America stepping forward. It really allowed me to say, see, this is not just a story that a few people care about. It's a story that all of us care about, and therefore it allowed me to sort of build on the private fundraising, the public fundraising, and ultimately, what really did it was there are literally hundreds of thousands of African Americans who don't make a lot of money who sent in $20, $50, $100. So for me, the power is that we had the elite and the street.
And for Lonnie Bunch, the museum will always have a critical role to play in the conversation of our nation.
I think the next challenge is to realize that we have to make sure that the museum does the work that helps it look at today as well as yesterday, that we need to use history as a way to contextualize contemporary considerations. So it's really looking at what kind of public programs do we create? How do we engage in the conversations around Confederate statues? In essence, the goal here is to say this museum will help us understand today and tomorrow by looking back at yesterday. And so ultimately what I hope we do is bring people together, create a sense of what is possible, and to allow people to believe in an America that didn't believe in them.
After the break, from paparazzi to celebrity photographer, our slice of life is clicking his way to the top.
It actually was a blessing in disguise that led to me doing photography and ultimately being a personal photographer to the likes of some of today's most popular celebrities.